Rewind-A-Dynamite from the post-wrestling site. AEW, lighting up the fuse. Sit back and enjoy the bubbly as we hear from John and Wai Ting. Where we're going, we don't need roads. And if the buck stops here, this thing might blow. Everything you hear are opinions of the show. And if you don't like it, go to the forums and let them know.
Welcome to Rewind-A-Dynamite. I'm John Pollock with Wai Ting here on a Wednesday evening at the post office. Wai, how are you?
I'm doing well. Yourself?
I'm doing very well. We were expecting a big snowstorm today, and while snow did arrive, it was hardly as feared.
Yeah. Good. I'm happy for that. It's still set to continue through the night, so I am ready to do a bit of shoveling tomorrow. But yeah, it sounds like not as bad as people were predicting.
Yeah, well, now that we've jinxed it, I can only imagine what we're going to wake up to tomorrow.
I guess we'll find out.
We shall find out. Well, no matter where you live, it's always good to wear things. No matter if it's cold or warm, you should always have something that looks stylish. And
yeah, you shouldn't be naked.
You can if you choose to, but you'd look so much more cool if you were wearing something from the post-wrestling store. And I know what many people are thinking. Wow, I just wish I could get my hands on some of that sweet clothing that you can get at store.postwrestling.com. Well, wait a minute. I'm a cafe member, and I know that at the beginning of every Rewind-A-Dynamite, I'm in a draw to win such an item so that I don't have to go out naked. I could wear a hat. I could wear a t-shirt. Many options. But yeah. I've got to win this draw.
You know, this might be the best setup you've ever done for one of these. Epic.
It's exciting. I mean,
certainly.
Who doesn't like to win stuff?
I love winning stuff. So let's give something away right now.
Okay, everybody. Who is going to get clothed? Wai Ting is reaching deep. He has selected the winner, and clothing is going to be presented to.
Congratulations to Robert Ringholm. Robert Ringholm.
This one's
from Stockholm.
Robert Ringholm from Stockholm?
Yeah.
Well, this rings true for Robert because I know that he has wanted to win for months and months. So congratulations, Robert. Wai Ting is going to come to Sweden and hand deliver this to you.
I would love to. Are you kidding me? Yeah.
Through his Swedish help. The spirit of Wai Ting will come to Sweden.
Yeah, IKEA, I'm sure, has some sort of exchange program.
Congratulations. Where do you want to move on to? We have lots of stuff to talk about. We have an announcement to make that Thursday night, for those of you listening, we have a special Thursday night edition of the Cafe Hangout. Wai and I are going to be hanging out on Thursday night with all of you. Special start time of 9 p.m. Eastern time. All of you can tune in live on the Post Wrestling Cafe if you are members. And we're going to be joined by Mike Murray, and we're going to go through the Super ShowDown event that's happening on Thursday morning. This kickoff show is kicking off at 11 a.m.
Really? Okay. That's kind of good, actually.
In what way?
I don't have to wait that long.
That's true. You can wake up and...
Yeah.
I mean, nothing to me says gigantic event than a Thursday afternoon. That'd be preposterous. Thursday at 11 a.m.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, we know the deal, right? It's not really supposed to be a huge event for you or I. It's supposed to be a big event for the people that are paying for the show.
Can we just rename these Mansoor Mania? That should be what these shows are.
Sure. Yeah.
It should be a 10-year journey of Mansoor going from Cesaro to Dolph Ziggler, and he eventually wins like a championship at one of these. And it's just like that is the storyline from show to show of all of these. Mansoor Mania.
I guess I'm surprised that they haven't done more with him on this side of the world. Beyond like, the occasional NXT appearance and then like a kickoff commentary gig.
Has he even been on NXT since the last show with Cesaro? I don't even know if he's been on NXT since.
Yeah, I don't know. But if he was, it wasn't anything notable. But certainly he's played a major role in these shows for a couple of years now. You'd figure they would give him some presence on the show, at least like, have him drafted to one of these programs. But it's really odd. He's like that character who only appears like in an alternate universe, like twice a year.
In one world, he is defeating Cesaro and he's the biggest babyface on that entire show. And then in the real world, his most memorable moment, I would say thus far, has been his Mauro Ranallo impression.
Yes, sure. That's one of them. Maybe like these Saudi Arabia shows are meant to be like dream sequences. We're getting a glimpse into somebody's dream sequence.
Do you imagine if they just did like a bunch of title changes and then we come back and none of them are acknowledged on TV?
Yeah.
It's like they're non-canon and they just are there for what if scenarios.
Yeah, Shawn Michaels didn't really come back from retirement.
Yeah, none of this stuff exists.
Yeah,
Shawn Michaels was caught on that moonsault.
Sure. Yes.
Or wasn't, I guess. Whichever
what
way.
Moonsault? What are you talking about?
Exactly. Well, we're going to chat about that on Thursday night and take your phone calls. So looking forward to hanging out with Mike and, of course, Yue. So that's coming up on Thursday night. Then Saturday morning, it's a Saturday morning edition of Rewind-A SmackDown. And everything that happens on that show happens in all universes attached to post wrestling, so you can tune into that show on the cafe. And then Saturday night we're back with our AEW Revolution post show. Wai and I will be going live right after the pay-per-view for Double Ice Cap and Espresso members of the Post Wrestling Cafe, and then Thunderstruck drops on Sunday. So lots of shows to look forward to this weekend.
Very busy week. Yeah, a lot to talk about. So let's get started.
Yes, lots of news to get to. I encourage everyone to check out all of Andrew Thompson's updates and news items, and there's no shortage of them today. Let's start off with New Japan, who this is an enormous deal. They have had to cancel their shows from March 1st through the 15th because of the coronavirus outbreak, and being advised by the Japanese Ministry of Health, just being warned about this, and it's obviously significant enough that they are axing a bunch of shows. This will include the anniversary show that was to be headlined by Tetsuya Naito and Hiromu Takahashi, and the first 8 shows of the New Japan Cup, which just throw a total wrench into those plans. This is a major deal for New Japan to have to cut out all of these shows, and is I can't imagine the planning of having to come up with how you're going to build up this Sumo Hall show at the end of the month. Not to say like wrestling booking is the biggest priority here. Obviously, this is a big health concern, but from the wrestling end of things, this is definitely a logistical nightmare.
Oh, certainly. Yeah, I mean, just for the entire society, I'm sure logistical nightmares are happening all over the place. But it happened with Stardom. It's happening with DDT. Tokyo Joshi Pro, and it seems like New Japan was just going to go ahead and do these shows, but I guess when the government steps in or recommends something, people really start to listen. And I'm sure anybody who does attend, I'm sure New Japan probably wouldn't want to put these shows on while people are feeling like in this state and probably not that comfortable being around big public spaces anyway. So,
and I'm guessing they didn't want to do like DDT and Tokyo Joshi Pro, as well as Stardom. They've done or are planning to do some empty arena shows. And I'm just guessing that they didn't feel they wanted to go that route with any of these shows. I guess it would just be, it's one thing to be doing it, I think, as like a novelty for some of these companies. I would say for New Japan doing all of these shows without fans, I guess they just figured like this is not in our best interest to just shelve the shows.
Perhaps, yeah. And we're also talking, at this point, I think, pretty heavily anticipated matchups that they'd be missing gates on. So I feel like there certainly would be a way to like reshuffle things, just to delay a match like Hiromu versus Naito, and even delaying the entire New Japan Cup to later shows.
Well, I was looking at the dates they have left, and they've got shows still announced for the 16th, 17th, 18th, 20th, and 21st. So you've got 5 shows before Sakura Genesis, and you could still do like the first 2 shows. You do the round of 32, then you do the round of 16 on its own show, and then you do the quarterfinals on the 20th, and that would leave you with the 21st to do the semifinals and finals. So 2 guys would have to work 2 matches on the final show to set up the challenger. That's doable. The problem is that who knows if they're going to be able to come back on the 16th. I mean, this is not something where it's just going to be one day everyone wakes up and this is not a threat any longer. These shows could also be threatened as well. So I don't know how much you can necessarily bank on them being able to run the 16th. They're in Toyama that night. Then they're in Saitama on the 17th. And then Shizuoka on the 18th. I mean, those are all probably, at best, up in the air right now.
Yeah. I don't even know how you would really plan a contingency plan for something like that. I mean, I feel like you could probably only book as much as you're able to, knowing what you know right now. So I'm sure if that problem arises, they'll probably deal with it then. But until then,
video game simulation.
Okay, so people will just like play each other as their video game characters in like Fire Pro or something online.
That could be a compromise.
I would kind of watch that. I'd love to see Minoru Suzuki like play a video game.
They do their own commentary for their match.
Yeah.
That could be something. Minoru Suzuki and Yuji Nagata in the opening round on Fire Pro.
Sign me up.
Well, it's certainly this didn't come out of left field that this was going to affect New Japan, and it's going to be something to watch too. That now you've seen cases emerging in the United States. They had the CDC report come out stating it's not a matter of if, but when that the coronavirus is going to come to the U.S. So it's like they are making preparations now in the U.S. and many other countries as well. So
for Japan, the big one is the Olympics coming up in the summer.
Of course,
man, I'm sure like anybody involved in that is really kind of a little anxious thinking about whether or not any of this stuff will still be around and affecting that.
Yeah, I mean, travel to that part of the world where you've got to be, I mean, that's like logistically, it just seems to be, I don't know how you go about that. Certainly above my level of comprehension of like just the ripple effect of something like this. And I mean, we saw this firsthand with like the SARS outbreak in 2003 and what our city was like kind of hit with that.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, this is even bigger.
All right. Well, we will keep it monitored on the New Japan front, but pretty much no shows for the first half of March. So New Japan Cup anniversary show all put on hold for the time being. Other news to get to, a couple of matches have been added to Super ShowDown. We mentioned Mansoor is going to be taking on Dolph Ziggler, and they've also announced Angel Garza versus Humberto Carrillo, a rematch from Monday, and the Viking Raiders against Carl Anderson and Luke Gallows for the show. That'll be on the kickoff portion. So more so rounding out the card, and Mansoor had already stated he knew he was going to be on the show, just did not know who his opponent was going to be. And I mean, just in terms of a reaction, I'm expecting Mansoor and Ziggler to be among the most heated things on the show because I mean, Mansoor came out of that. He was just treated like a superstar on that last show in October.
I'm actually kind of surprised they don't have something bigger for Mansoor than Dolph Ziggler. You know, considering like they had him win that Battle Royal one time. You'd figure he'd be on the actual card rather than a kickoff in a more high-profile matchup. But
I don't know if he's on the kickoff. It might be the main show.
Oh, okay. Okay, yeah. Then. Yeah.
Yeah, the tag match is the only one I'm aware of for sure is on the kickoff.
Right.
But yeah, those are the 3 matches added for that. And the WWE has also confirmed what we had stated on Monday. The Undertaker is there, so expect to see him on the show.
They actually showed a video, I think it was like a tourist group that was there shooting these beautiful slow-mo images of everybody arriving off the plane, and it's I don't know how much the WWE enjoyed all this because it was Bray Wyatt out of character, all these people disheveled a little bit coming off of these long flights. R-Truth wearing face masks. The Undertaker being shown right there, of course. So
they've just been in an airplane for God knows how many hours, and then they get out and there's just everyone filming them and stuff. But I mean, that's, I guess, kind of part of the gig. Samoa Joe has been suspended for 30 days over his first wellness policy violation. That is the extent of the message that the WWE sent out. No further details beyond that. This will put him out until the week before WrestleMania. So about a week and a half before WrestleMania. And I guess that's the natural question is, does this kind of remove him from WrestleMania plans, or do they slot him in and he gets onto that card? I guess is the question.
It comes on the heels of several news items concerning Samoa Joe that aren't, unfortunately, very positive. So, the timing is really interesting in that he is eligible to come back before WrestleMania. I personally don't. I think I would personally rule out the possibility of him being in a high profile program. At most, I see him being involved in sort of mid card multi-man IC title match or something like that. Maybe even Andre Battle Royal, unfortunately.
I could see him regardless getting into the Andre Battle Royal. I would say, I would imagine just based on television that we're either building up for Rollins versus Owens or Rollins and Murphy against Owens and Joe. And I guess that's the question is, does he get that level of a match? Because I can certainly see him, if he's taken out of that match, he's just tossed into the Battle Royal or something.
Do we even know that do we know what his injury is and whether or not he'd be okay by the time that his suspension is up?
Yeah, that's another question because he did injure himself on that commercial shoot recently. So he was dealing with that on top of things. So yeah, it's a great point. It's even when these 30 days are up, we don't know what the extent of that injury was as well. And he had just been coming back from a concussion prior to that. So he has had just a horrible last month in terms of all of this. I'm always curious with these wellness violations of that, just not so much even the policy portion, but the fact that the talent, I've seen enough cases now in the UFC with USADA that there was a time when you would hear, guys would come up with excuses or they'd have their story for it. And sometimes you didn't know how much credence to give it to. But now, there are numerous cases that men and women have brought up that, they have solid defenses and they have had stuff that's been unexplained that is ended up in their system. And there's also now a level of sophistication that is picking up things in systems that is so microscopic when we're talking about picograms in some cases that, and I don't know what the specifics are with Joe. I'm talking about just all of these that you have to be asking these questions as well. What are these guys failing for? What are the substances? What kind of testing is being done on them? Because we've seen irregularities in the testing in MMA, and you have to naturally assume what's kind of the technology and level of sophistication in these tests that WWE wrestlers are subjected to, but they do not get a chance to go and defend themselves or present a case or anything like that. It's kind of, they just take the suspension, they never talk about it, and that's it.
I recall people like Paige at one time kind of giving an explanation online. I don't know if it's really encouraged, for performers to go out on Twitter, for instance, and defend themselves. Maybe, I don't know. I'm not sure how that works, but
I'm sure it's not. I just think when you just see someone is suspended for a wellness violation, it sends fans into speculative territory, and they're just making assumptions. And we know that you can be suspended just for not providing a test, and no one knows. Like, no one knows what the violation is over. And I would just think for some of these people that you wouldn't want fans assuming the worst. And that's what's going to happen when you just have such vague, one-word explanation statements that come out from one side, which is the company. And, you know, the performers, I think they have their side too of like what exactly happened here. Yeah.
I almost feel like, you know, the mystery is almost like it's certainly intentional. I feel like the less they have to reveal, the better they probably consider it.
Lance Archer has signed with AEW a multi-year deal, and they indicated on tonight's show that there will be more on this next week. They didn't flat out say he would be on the show next week, but it was kind of hinted at. Lance Archer, we knew they had been in talks. I think this is a very good pickup for AEW, but I also think it's like a big loss for New Japan that they did not lock this guy down and be able to retain him.
I think so too. I think, you know, we were all surprised when we discovered that he wasn't already on a full-time deal coming off of that great performance in the G1 and then, you know, even a subsequent title reign as the U.S. champion. But obviously they've had plenty of chances to keep the guy, and, you know, they didn't take it. All AEW did, and I'm very happy for Lance Archer. You know,
like this guy won. This guy, he like earned this contract in every sense of the word, because his stock a year ago, pre G1 to now, just has the opposite of the WWE stock in the last year. I mean, he went into that G1, and I think he realized this is my last chance to just go all out and show people what I can do at this age. I'm, he's without a tag partner. He's probably realizing that, this is my last chance perhaps with New Japan. Like, there's so much talent out there. Mm-hmm. That guy just busted his ass, and he's gotten a great contract at the end of it, just not with New Japan.
As a fan, I'm kind of disappointed that we're not going to see him interact with like the Japanese crowds anymore. I thought he was so great, just like playing heel against them. But, this kind of offers like a new opportunity to see a different side of him, I think. One that relies a bit more on his promo ability. We'll see how they fit him into like AEW, but I think it's a real positive. Even at one time, I think there were a number of like Dark Order teases. One of them had, I believe this was on their Twitter or something, like one of them actually like had a veiled reference to him in the form of like everybody dies, I believe was like the end of like one of their cryptic tweets. So yes, at the very least, I think they were at least hinting that he could be one of the candidates for the Exalted One or something. But the reveal today online and also on the TV show seems to take that away.
Some ratings notes. Monday's episode of Raw, they were down 9% this week. They did just over 2.2 million viewers. So they were down 9% in viewers, down 10% in the 18 to 49 demo. But when you go into the trends throughout the show, I think there's a lot of positive you can take from this number. Of the 8 key demos that they list, 7 out of 8 of those categories grew in the second hour. And with adults 18 to 34 and females 12 to 34, there was growth every hour, including in the third, among those demographics. And I take that as like a really positive sign, just telling me that I put together an episode that people were engaged in, and there was growth in a lot of these areas throughout the show, instead of like the usual pattern of, down a bit in the second hour, and then the third hour, the show plummets. And that wasn't the case. For women 12 to 34, in the third hour, it was up 39% from hour one. So I think there's a lot of positive you can take from this beyond just looking at viewers being down and the main demo being down.
I'm happy to hear that, because I would say, from our perspective and from the audience's perspective, it seemed to be a show that was very well received by everybody creatively. And to see numbers back that up is certainly, I would say, maybe, I don't know, gives me hope that they will do more of what we of the type of show that we saw on Monday. So I'm happy to hear it.
Yeah, I would love to see the breakdown of the third hour and what was the big segment in that third hour, because it could be one of two things in my mind. It was the contract signing with the women, with the tease of Shayna and Becky, and the main event with Randy Orton and Kevin Owens that was set up in the first segment. I would say you have to look at those two as probably the key reasons people were really invested in that third hour.
Mm-hmm.
So that was, I think, good news from this past week's number. And the final thing is XFL numbers for the third week. ABC game was down 11% in viewers, 18% in the demo. Fox game was down 12% and 6%. And the FS1 game was down 26% in viewers, 28% in the demo. So we're still looking at big, or at least double-digit drops in a lot of these categories, but certainly not at the level of week one. So I think we're still in the early stages here, and I think next week you'll get a pretty good picture of what these numbers are settling in at. But I mean, you're talking about, I think if you were grading this, I think you would give this a B to a B minus. I think in terms of like expectation versus what are the numbers you're delivering. I think it's not, I wouldn't be over the moon with these numbers, but I wouldn't be looking at this as like bombing. It's not. Like all these games, they did top 1 million viewers. The Fox game top 2 million. So I think that it's a moderate success at this point, given what it could have been of just 1 week and then it just goes to hell.
The goal, I mean, is to simply be alive, isn't it? For now, for the next couple seasons, right?
I think they'll have the financing to at least get 2 seasons out of this.
How about the network backing?
Well, I think the main key is that there's you certainly want to have these networks. I think if these numbers tanked, you would be forced to be on like FS1 for most of your games. So it's maintaining a certain level of audience that you have this network support, that you're not dragging down their audiences. But essentially it's keeping these broadcasters happy and at a level that for afternoon numbers that they're happy with. And by the end of this period, someone's willing to offer them a lot of money for these games.
Mm-hmm.
So
do you any idea what industry expectations might be for something like this, and how, whether or not they're meeting, exceeding?
I was listening to an interview with John Orand, who's with Sports Business Journal, and he was talking about like some of the networks, like they're not over the moon with these numbers, but they're satisfied. And those would, to me, be, he didn't get into specifics like network to network, but I would imagine that would be the case with like ABC, Fox, and to a degree ESPN. FS1, on the other hand, like it's a much lower rated network. So even this past week's game doing 1.4 million, I think like FS1, I would say, has to be ecstatic at a number like that. Like they are not pulling in 1 million viewers too often. I mean, there wasn't, it was, you need a really, really big like UFC prelims or fight night to be hitting 1 million viewers for them. Like I think would be very happy with that number. So you have to look at the scale as well. ABC, Fox, and ESPN, they're going to have a higher level that they're trying to achieve. But I still feel like for these afternoon, early evening games, these are not embarrassing numbers, even by week 3.
Cool.
All right. All your news you can find up at postwrestling.com, and we'll have coverage throughout Super ShowDown on Thursday on the site. Let us get into, actually, for NXT tonight, Ric Flair was there at the show. He came out. He did a promo before they went live on the air. He was told he had a strict time to be done by, and I guess he hit it. But this week was his birthday, and today would have been Reed's 32nd birthday. So I can only imagine what just a terrible day this is for him to at least be there today for Charlotte's match and all that. I can't even imagine what this day is like for him.
Oh, yeah. Like crazy emotions. Yeah. He was just at the Lakers game the other day.
Yeah, on his birthday, he was there. Yeah. So, yeah, he turned 71 this week. So, anyway, Braden and Davey will have a full rundown of NXT on up next. But Dynamite took place from Kansas City tonight, and we immediately started things off with just a quick preview of the show and into the 30-minute Iron Man match. I thought very good placement, Way, putting this on first as opposed to later in the show.
I agree completely. I mean, you're talking about a time when I think the crowd has its highest level of energy, and to start the show off with a 30-minute match actually kind of feels like it's the norm anyway with AEW Dynamite. I mean, typically they go probably at least 18 minutes commercial free.
I think they went... it was around 21 before they went to their first commercial break here. So it's
that's not that different from any other week.
Yeah. So they came out. This feels like a broken record, but another electric crowd in Kansas City tonight. They were fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
We had a what bar sign, Way?
Amazing.
Those guys, they're just superstars.
I forgot to thank Brian and his lady friend for the post-wrestling sign on Raw. So thank you very much for that. I did catch it.
Oh, thank you, everyone. That is you fans are our advertising budget, so we thank you. We had the countdown clock on the screens. The audience is just rabid from the get-go. And we have the Young Bucks out with Kenny Omega, but no Hangman Page, which the announcers shone a light on.
It's such a tiny, I mean, not that tiny of a detail, but something that I think could have completely been a wasted opportunity. You know, typically you would have just had Omega come out, but to do this thing with the Bucks, just makes you think about the actual match that's taking place on Sunday. I thought it was really smart.
So this match, in the opening minutes, we're getting teases of the One-Winged Angel and Brutalizer that both get stopped. PAC does a moonsault off the apron that gets caught into a swinging DDT, and then our first Jesus Christ moment was PAC, where you thought he was going for a traditional superplex. Dude does a brain buster off the top. This thing looked insane.
I can't really comprehend the what you need to do exactly different to make sure that a move is more of a brain buster than a superplex, but to do it safely from that height, it was really incredible. And I mean, it seemed like an expert level move that obviously these two experts were demonstrated perfectly.
I mean, 10 minutes into this, they were going at just an unbelievable pace, and they pretty much kept it up for the whole match.
It just it moved by so fast. 10 minutes was in.
They even had the clock up there, and when we were down to 4 minutes, I was like, how have we gone through it? It breezed by. This was the fastest 30 minutes.
I totally agree. Typically, I was ready for it too for watching this one, but any Iron Man match typically is just the first moments are going to be slow and then they're going to ramp up. But they were fast the whole time, and I thought it was compelling the entire time.
Kenny hit a Tiger Driver 98, only gets a 2 count. Then he busts out Croyt's Wrath, and this place went nuts when PAC kicked out of this.
Yeah, I don't know how many people, obviously the audience recognizes, at least a good portion of the audience recognizes that move. The announcers didn't so much, but nonetheless.
Which I was very surprised Excalibur didn't identify it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a move he so rarely pulls out, but you're right. Excalibur.
Even in New Japan, that was a rarity that he would use that move. I mean, he had pretty much retired that move for his peak years that people were discovering Kenny Omega or seeing his biggest matches.
Crowd got it though.
Yep, they went nuts. I mean, it's just aesthetically, it's a beautiful move. So the One-Winged Angel gets set up, and Kenny climbs the turnbuckle with him. I didn't know what this was like. I don't mean to compare this to Carmella, but when Carmella went for that dive and Naomi was already on the edge of the apron, it was what was Carmella going to do here? My question was, what was Kenny going to do if PAC did not turn this into a sunset bomb? Was he going to go off the top to the floor?
Wasn't he going to do a super One-Winged Angel?
Yeah, but he was facing outward toward the crowd. Where was he going to go with this guy? To the floor?
You could jump backwards to do the move.
I guess so. I guess you could have done that. That's one way. Omega then takes the Sunset Bomb. He comes back with a Snapdragon. There's a V-trigger, huge near fall again. We're about midway through when PAC grabs a chair and nails him for the first DQ in Dynamite history. And Kenny has the first fall, with the idea here that PAC was going to weaken him, but in the process had to sacrifice a fall.
It's a stat that honestly surprised me to hear that this was the first DQ in Dynamite history in what, like 6 months now of this, or 5-6 months. And they picked like a time that to do it where it didn't really leave a sour taste in your mouth at all. Like they did it. They picked the spot to do it, the first DQ finish at a time when it was strategic and told a story.
So immediately after, and I was really glad that they did this, was he's weakened from the chair shot and he hits this fantastic black arrow and pins him at 16:39 of the match before we go to our picture-in-picture. So, but they made the DQ mean something because this was the trade-off, was PAC gets a fall out of this.
Yeah. I feel like we saw this at a recent Iron Man match, didn't we?
It's been used in the past, the idea of a guy just killing someone, DQ'd, but then goes up a few falls or something.
He gets the advantage from this point on because he'll be dealing with a weakened opponent for the rest of the match.
We come back. Omega had retreated to the floor to avoid another black arrow. And the next big spot is Kenny getting hit with a Falcon arrow off the edge of the apron to the floor, which unfortunately Tony Schiavone was in mid-plug for the countdown special and had to finish his plug before he could react to this absolutely insane moment. And then we get what's quickly replacing my Fight Forever as my most hated chant. It's the holy shit chant because we got to censor it. And at least now they just censor nonstop and they're not just trying to catch shit when the crowd says it. But still, you
figure like so many weeks in now, like if TSN had that big of an issue with it, I mean,
is this like what I don't understand? I would understand if it's like a blanket content issue, but an hour and a half later, I've got Chris Jericho calling Pat Mahomes a piece of shit on the microphone, clear as day.
Well, okay, here's the thing. I think TSN tried to censor that one too, but they were just late because I heard like a bit of silence after the fact. That was very late. But like, I'm trying to say, if TSN has this much difficulty with it, you figure
sometimes it is TNT. It's not always just strictly a TSN thing either. Oh,
really? Because if it was TNT, like I don't think Jericho would have just said that. Would have just said shit, knowing that the broadcaster would have had any issue with it. And
my understanding is that TSN has the ability to, but sometimes it will be TNT as well. But I don't know which is which in these examples.
All I'm trying to say is that, I know it's only Canada. They're only the Canadian broadcaster. But still, if they have that big of an issue with it, you figure TSN would have complained to AEW and AEW would have at least tried to cut it down. Certainly, like maybe wouldn't have had Jericho just blatantly say, shit out there. And but it's silly. Like, I don't know. I know there are different rules for like different countries and their broadcast codes, but come on. Is the word shit really affecting anybody? They even tried to censor the word asshole from the crowd here. And I thought
crowd chants to me, it's just,
that was just
overboard.
I just
fundamentally just disagree with that premise that's somehow offending you and it's something you have no control over as the broadcaster. That, I mean, there has to be some leeway to what fans are going to chant. I mean, if you want to regulate promos and content, okay, I can understand that because that is at least under your jurisdiction of control. But I mean, I don't know. I just go to the fundamental. I don't find swearing to be all that offensive to children, to anybody. It's just, anyway, that's I guess, deeper discussion. But we move on here, and PAC drop kicks Omega to the floor, and this takes out Paul Turner, allowing PAC to bring out a table and takes out Omega with a shooting star press to the floor. You have never seen a man more nervous than PAC on the top of this turnbuckle getting ready for this spot. But I really like the attention to detail of at least taking out Paul Turner before they did this.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I didn't even think of that. Yeah.
Because I think there was a time, for going back to that first episode with Moxley and Omega with the glass, and that was like a thing about what does it take to get DQ'd in this company. And they're at least doing the little things to give, credibility to the referee here that, he was legitimately out and could not have seen this table. And I'm just glad they're thinking that way.
Very true.
And they do a big count out tease. Omega gets in. It was an insane table spot. And Omega gets his knees up for the Black Arrow and starts fighting back with V-triggers. Poison Rana by PAC, and he applies the brutalizer. With less than 3 minutes left, Omega fights to the rope. PAC then reapplies it. Omega's trying to block. He's trying to break the grip, but PAC is holding on, and time expires after 30 minutes. After the fact, PAC attacks referee Paul Turner. Justin Roberts announces, like WrestleMania 12, it's sudden death rules as the biggest babyface in this match, Aubrey Edwards, enters with a huge chant, and the overtime goes 61 seconds as Omega hits the V-trigger, followed by the Kamagoye, which can't keep PAC down, but the one-winged angel does, and Kenny Omega wins. Spectacular match.
Great match, yeah. Like I said, anytime they announce an Iron Man match, I certainly mentally prepare myself to potentially be kind of bored for the first half. And I certainly felt like doing it on TV was a big risk. And after seeing this, I don't know why I doubted these guys, because this was I think one of the best 30-minute Iron Man matches I've seen. In my opinion, it was the best Kenny Omega match I've seen in AEW thus far. It just
I went into this thinking, how in the hell are they going to top the tag match that Omega and Page just had with the Lucha Brothers last week? And I thought they did it. I think this is one of the best matches this year.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I like the finish as well. You drag it out to a sudden death so that in a way it kind of protects PAC because it's like the Brett finish, right? If he had held on to the move, he would have won. But because the time limit ran out, he had to let go. So he has that at least, to argue. But just it flew by. 30 minutes passed, and I was like, I still wanted more. And you're talking to somebody, again, who, we watch so much wrestling. I rarely ever want matches to go more than, there are a lot of time, especially a 30-minute match. So this was to me, a real accomplishment.
Yeah, I really love this match. And threw in the Kamagoye at the end, Way.
That was surprising, yeah. So he seems to have adopted it now as sort of like a secondary finisher, or at least a lead-up move.
Yeah, I almost took it like it's not a finisher.
No,
keep him down. Yeah.
So
that's our second Kota Ibushi reference on Dynamite since this show has begun.
Right. The other one being the video game.
Video game.
Yeah.
And I don't believe it's going anywhere. I think it's more so just being thrown out there by Kenny.
Yeah.
Tony Schiavone interviewed PAC on the ramp, and Tony Schiavone, I thought almost was about to turn himself heel here because he was just so over the top saying, after all that you did to Kenny's friends, all of this build up, and then to come up and you fucking lose. And it was like, you have just watched this guy go through this unbelievable war. I didn't think it was possible that I thought that they made PAC sympathetic to Stephen A. Smith here, Tony Schiavone.
I agree. Yeah. I know Tony's role here is to antagonize, but yeah, it was almost a little too antagonistic here for a babyface announcer.
I just wanted PAC to have a longer retort. He was just getting going, accusing Tony of taking the piss when Orange Cassidy came out, and PAC just drills him as the agents are out, Jerry Lynn, BJ Whitmer, QT, and they all tend to Orange Cassidy, and that's going to be the pay-per-view match. We're going to get Orange Cassidy's first singles match in AEW against PAC.
I would say a really unique match to make, especially for Orange Cassidy's first one. And part of me wonders if maybe the thinking here is very similar to maybe what the online reaction was to seeing Orange Cassidy versus Minoru Suzuki announce. Your most badass kind of no bullshit, asshole type of wrestler versus whatever Orange Cassidy is, the slacker. It's a match that I have no idea how it's going to look, because it can't strictly be a comedy match, because PAC is not a comedy character. He's somebody that you have to protect. So how are they going to make it compelling? How are they going to get something out of it to satisfy audiences?
Yeah, coming off of like this loss for PAC, like you want to give him maybe a definitive big win with the Brutalizer, but I think for Orange Cassidy, like you have to give that audience something here, that it can't just be 2 minutes. I think you have to give Cassidy something in this match. So I think there's a curiosity to see how this match is laid out, but I do feel like PAC should get a definitive win here. For sure. But at the same time, it's like they've really held Orange Cassidy off. I mean, this is his first singles match, right? So the general AEW audience hasn't really seen so much of like what he can do. I think saving it for a pay-per-view is a really smart move, because he is at this point like one of the more well-protected, most over guys in the company. So I think it's kind of a nice little hook for the pay-per-view. Lexi Nair was outside the locker room of the Painmaker Posse, which is like Jericho's fight team, which is pretty much the Inner Circle. Jake Hager answers the door, and she asks if they can speak to Chris Jericho, and Hager does not speak. He's back to being the mute. Well, yeah, Jeff Cobb's gone, so. No mention of Jeff Cobb on the show at all. Yeah, it was almost as if he worked for a different company. He might have some free time now with no New Japan Cup. True, you're right. Yeah. Well, who knows? Sammy Guevara, Ortiz, and Santana took on the the Jurassic Express, with Luchasaurus, Marco Stunt, and Jungle Boy. And this is when Taz popped onto commentary with Excalibur and Jim Ross. Luchasaurus, unless I hadn't heard it before, but I feel like the Inner Circle have this new song for their entrance. Am I wrong? Typically they come out to Chris Jericho's music, but tonight I heard them come out to their own theme. Oh, they may have. I didn't notice. It sounded kind of like the Evolution music. But maybe that's just because I just watched the Ruthless Aggression thing. Oh yeah, we'll chat about that at the end. I forgot about that. Are they coming out to like some faux Motorhead? It just sounded like the opening chords, but I mean, all those songs sound like, like rock, like instrumental rock. Could have been the theme song for the pay-per-view. What is the theme song for the pay-per-view? I don't know. Okay. Is it Downstate? It's not Downstate. Oh, dude, Downstate is performing live on Saturday. I know. Yeah. Are you sad you can't be there? No, my state is up that I will not be seeing Downstate live. If Downstate played a concert in Toronto, would you go? Is that a serious question? What would possibly get me out of my house to depart with money to go and sit in a seat and have to hear whatever the catalog of songs that Downstate has to provide to me? If I like, there's a part of me that as much as I like the guy, I will never 100% have positive thoughts about Braden just because of that trip, because of what he did to me. He just will not be a perfect person in my Rolodex of friends because of that. What if they were like opening for Aqua? Would you go late? Aqua would never stoop to that level. Unless maybe Aqua could do a cover of All In. That I want to hear. Ortiz, Santana's still wearing the eye patch. This was just like a fun 6-man tag with a million things going on at once. It built up after getting the heat on Marco Stunt. They got the huge hot tag to Luchasaurus. He hit the fossilizer on Santana, which is Jim Ross's new favorite move, and then continued with a chokeslam, standing moonsault. They triple teamed Sammy Guevara with triple super kicks. Stunt dove through Sammy's legs as he was set up for a vertebreaker. And then Jungle Boy rolls back, hits his head, allowing Bryce Remsburg to tend to Jungle Boy. And Sammy got the loaded sock. And Darby Allin appears out of nowhere, grabs the sock away, and Jungle Boy rolls up Guevara and pins him. So Darby costs Sammy the victory here, and then Darby sends Sammy onto Ortiz and Santana on the floor. So a lot of losses for Sammy Guevara heading into Revolution at the hands of Darby Allin.
It's true, but you know what? I mean, doesn't affect my interest in that match at all. I think I was probably somebody who suggested that, why did it have to be Sammy Guevara losing to Dustin last week? But
he gets the better of Darby later in the show as well, so It wasn't like this was the final interaction between these two.
But I guess like Sammy is kind of in a position where he can lose, and it doesn't matter because like he's such a shit disturbing heel that you still hate him either way, and you still want to see him get his ass kicked by Darby Allin specifically. That, I mean, he could take these losses and it doesn't matter. So at least for this cycle. And, Jungle Boy got a good win coming out of this. I thought this was like a really excellent multi-man match that was like the perfect way to follow an Iron Man match. Not to say like the Iron Man match was slow paced at all, but this was like that much faster because you had 6 guys doing this type of style of match that was just like full of high spots. And then, Luchasaurus, again, like one of the most over guys in the entire company, just clearing house. I feel like the temptation is always going to be there to break him off as a singles, but I really hope they like resist for like a good while, because I think he just feels so much more special being like such a big guy amongst like such a smaller crop of other guys that I'd love to. I just love him in this sort of like mix.
They aired a video for Cody and MJF with MJF talking about their friendship. This was before Full Gear, and then showcasing the turn at the pay-per-view as we went into the song Dead to Me by the Wolves.
Okay, so that's the theme, isn't it?
It was the music they used here. I don't know if it's like the overall pay-per-view theme, but perhaps it is.
I believe this was like taken right from the Countdown show, and I watched like the first 15 minutes of it. It looks really good because it's got like, I haven't gotten to that point yet, but like Randy Couture's in this, John.
Oh my God, really?
Because John Moxley is training at Extreme Couture.
Yeah, of course, that's the connection.
Yeah, so he's in this. I'm trying to think who else. Oh man, the section with like the Bucks and talking the Bucks versus Omega and Page is really good because they use all this other footage from DTE to tell like this very long narrative that like was really well done. Like I've seen their prior Countdown shows, like specifically the one before Full Gear. They've really kind of hit their stride with like storytelling and production for this cycle, and I would say this one was like a higher level.
Oh, that's great! I'll definitely watch that. It looks really intriguing. They've done very good with those in the past. And yeah, they recap the stipulations and Cody planning to give MJF his own scar at Revolution. And yeah, this was the lone involvement of these two on the show tonight. I guess they felt they kind of peaked with the cage match last week, and there's didn't feel the need for a promo from either this week. I didn't dislike that at all. Sometimes you can risk cooling something off with like a week of nothingness. Maybe a promo or two would have been kind of nice, but then like what more could you have achieved doing a promo that you couldn't have achieved with a video like this? I guess for time, I think we could have heard from MJF this week, perhaps just coming off the cage match. But I mean, they have done a really great job with this program. I don't think you necessarily had to have something tonight because they have done so much over the past 2 months with this storyline. The Best Friends versus the Butcher and the Blade. Orange Cassidy came out. He was selling the attack from PAC, and they had the advantage on Trent for a long time. Blade drives him into the guardrail, but Trent came back with a spear. And as the four were on the floor fighting, the Bunny and Cassidy rolled into the ring, and just everyone stopped what they were doing to watch these two. He goes to put his hands in the pockets, and the Bunny stops him, takes his shades, and puts them on. So she goes for a low blow. He catches her, takes the bunny ears, and puts them on. The audience is going nuts for this. And then the Blade goes for Orange Cassidy, who avoids him, hits a tope suicida onto the Butcher on the floor, and it leads to strong zero on the Blade as the Best Friends win.
I thought it was a pretty standard match here. I wouldn't say anything that special, but the crowd really lit up, of course, when Orange Cassidy came into the ring. What a strange phenomenon this whole thing is. The fact that this guy, of all the wrestlers on that roster, happens to just be like one of the most popular wrestlers on television right now is is insane to me. So how they handle his first in-ring appearance will be very intriguing to me, because I'm sure it was like quite the puzzle. Sure, like, this gimmick works, in a GCW setting or an indie wrestling setting, but to translate it to TV, will they do anything differently? I don't know.
Shivani interviewed the best friends, and this is where they announced the PAC Orange Cassidy match for Revolution. Chuck Taylor was tasked with cutting the promo, saying the joke is on PAC because this time he's going to try. And the crowd chanted, he will try.
Like, Orange Cassidy is the Brock Lesnar of that team, or he's like, I don't know, like he's the guy that is so protected, and he
definitely puts the less in Lesnar.
You have to pay to see Orange Cassidy, whereas best friends are like just on TV every week. They aren't dark. They just wrestle all the time. They're like the guys that heat up Orange Cassidy, which is crazy to me, but obviously it's working.
Yuka Sakazaki, Big Swole, Shanna, and Hikaru Shida had a four-way match. Yuka's teeth were completely repaired.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Well,
they didn't even bring up, like, that was a pretty significant injury.
Yeah. Well, dental technology is very impressive these days. Probably got it.
So I shouldn't have felt so bad for her. This is an easy fix. This is an afternoon at the orthodontist.
Yeah, certainly no attempt at, like, her getting revenge on Britt Baker. Honestly, it's something I didn't even think about.
Well, I think when you do stuff like that, to me, it's like, that's a waste of an angle then.
I feel like it was just a way to, like, showcase, Britt Baker as a heel rather than anything longer term for Yuka Sakazaki. But I totally understand what you're saying. I think it's a bigger problem with, I think, the AEW women's division at large. It's just like, there doesn't seem to be too many individual stories outside of, like, the focused few. And you had a match here between these four where I would say, like, the problem exists for all four of them, where you can't really point to one, specific narrative that any one of them is currently going through.
Yeah, of the four, certainly Yuka Sakazaki was the most over of these four women. I thought Big Swole looked better in this. I thought she got a lot of shine throughout. Yuka Sakazaki got placed in the corner, and then Shida delivered a snap suplex to Shanna, sending her into Sakazaki. They got into this striking exchange between Swole and Shanna with a headbutt, head kick, and a cutter from Swole. Shanna then lifted her up for a double underhook slam. That was onto Sakazaki, and then Shida hit a Michinoku driver to Sakazaki on top of Big Swole, getting a 2 count, and then there was a running knee strike from Shida to pin Big Swole at the end of this.
I thought it became a decent match. I felt maybe a little bit awkward and clumsy at times. I think I also found the crowd's energy a little bit lower for this one. And I think much of that, again, has to do with just the lack of, I think, clear favorite for who the crowd wanted to win. Maybe it was supposed to be Yuka Sakazaki. I don't know. I thought they were chanting a lot for Big Swole as well. But the match was not really crafted to play towards any of those allegiances. In fact, it was like more, I found a lot of focus on Shanna, who looked great, but she's not really as over with the audience as a favorite. I ultimately kind of felt like it was hard to focus on somebody that I wanted to win. There was no clear favorite. And I think much of that comes down to character development too, and the lack of interviews and the lack of promos, and really just the lack of consistent appearance for a lot of the members of this particular match. So, hopefully, I mean, it seems like it's a number of like starts and stops with like women in this division. I thought Big Swole was going to get something coming out of like the challenge last week. She came out on stage, remember?
And it was like just got passed over for the title match and then loses here, and seems like she's at the back of the line.
So I thought that they were gonna, put the focus on Big Swole and make me want to see her story continue. But that seems to be cut short for now, because it seems like it's Hikaru Shida that's next in line.
I think when we talk about, just focus being diverted so many different directions, I think a much cleaner path would have been coming off of last week. We do Chris Statlander, Big Swole this week, and then we get our challenger. And let's wait till after the pay-per-view and we'll reintroduce Sakazaki from the injury. Then we can have Hikaru Shida if whatever we're doing with her, because none of this is time sensitive for the pay-per-view. All of this can be, these women, there's no rush here. That this week, there was a simple setup last week, and then you do the match this week, and Statlander wins. And I think Statlander Swole would have had a better opportunity at getting over with this audience who has already seen 90 minutes of pretty incredible stuff, that this is a very tough spot where, some of these women are not at the level.
I totally agree. They could have done that number one contenders match this week. And I think it would have provided a much more clear story to what we're going to get on Sunday. Certainly more so than I think the match that we got here.
They promoted the podcast, and then Dark Order did a quick promo saying the Exalted One is near and indicated they'll be taking on SCU at Revolution. So that looks to be another match, and said that Christopher Daniels will find himself obsolete.
Too obvious? You think?
I think they're just being way over the top now. I mean, the guy's contract is technically not up yet, so...
Isn't it up on March 1st?
Well, we're not at March 1st yet.
Oh, I mean, the promise that he was going to be here next week. I suppose what I'm trying to say is, was this too easy? Was it so obvious that, it's almost like making me think that it's not going to be Matt Hardy?
I think they're just trying to throw out lots of different ideas.
Do you think it's Matt Hardy?
It's really hard to say because he's it's not 100% that he's going to leave WWE yet. So I don't think you can necessarily say one way or the other. I mean, he might get some unbelievable offer and he's going to have a change of heart before Sunday.
Thing is, you throw out lines like this. I mean, if it's anybody but Matt Hardy, I think you really risk a lot of disappointment.
I mean, they've been teasing stuff with Matt. Matt's been teasing stuff throughout. So, I mean, it's hardly it's going to be a surprise if it's Matt Hardy, regardless of putting in these lines or not. I think they're just trying to raise speculation and expectation.
Yeah.
The issue is that if it's not Matt Hardy, it has to be someone of comparable or higher status than Matt Hardy once you've hinted at him. If it's
who could that possibly
once you're
be?
Teasing Matt Hardy, Luke Harper to me is underwhelming after you've teased Matt Hardy.
Who would you say? I mean, certainly there are a lot of wrestlers that are above Matt Hardy in terms of stature, but for a role like this, and that's a free agent right now. Who could it possibly? Who could be not a disappointment if it wasn't Matt Hardy?
Luther.
Don't know about that. The Rock. If The Rock showed up as the Exalted One, I think people wouldn't be disappointed.
The great Exalted One. Oh my God.
But seriously, there's nobody else. I'm trying to think.
Jim Ross.
Yeah, I don't think so. Vince McMahon.
It was me all along.
Yeah, exactly.
It's George Barrios.
See, that would make you and I pretty crazy. I think Brandon Howard would be going nuts.
Just with a mask with the hair popping out at the top?
I think it would be Barrios and Wilson, like a two-headed monster. Maybe you put two of them within a big shirt together with a big neck hole.
And they announce, we're launching the AEW network.
Whoa.
We've got all the data.
That's what joining the Dark Order means. Join it for $9.99.
I love that. No one's going to top George Barrios as the Exalted One. Jim Ross did his sit down with Kenny Omega, Hangman Page, and the Young Bucks. He asks Matt, did you ever expect to be in this situation? And these two being tag champions, and Matt can't believe it. He can't believe that they are not tag champions and that Omega and Page are. They're great singles wrestlers. JR believes that the Bucks are the best tag team in the world, but why haven't you won the tag titles yet? And Omega says that, we stumbled onto something great. The Bucks are the best tag team, and they inspire us. Page is sitting there with his beer, sarcastically says, oh yeah, it was all just a big accident. And JR just puts him on the spot. Hangman, why are you so uncomfortable? And Page got really uncomfortable by this question about being uncomfortable. Matt explained that they are his best friends, but on Saturday we're competitors and we're going to be the best team. Page reminds him, I tried to leave the Elite and you wouldn't even listen to me. And the Bucks start saying, do you know all we did for you? We put you on being the Elite. You were just a jobber in Ring of Honor. Paige says, this is the first title. This is the biggest accomplishment of my career. And the minute I get it, you're trying to take it away from me. So he got up, stormed out. I thought the segment was awesome. I thought Hangman was really compelling here. Mm-hmm. But again, Jim Ross was made for this role. He was fantastic as the moderator.
I totally agree. I mean, for some reason, I think like you put Jim Ross in that situation automatically. I think you could take it a little bit more seriously. And maybe some of that has to do with just, the credibility that he's maintained. And maybe that comes with questioning things like the alien gimmick and, maybe calling out things that seem a little too cartoonish because when he's serious, I think he's certainly at his best. So he's great, but I mean, I was very impressed with Paige. His body language, even when he wasn't speaking, I thought told you everything you needed to know about where his head was at as a character. Matt Jackson, I think though, continues for me to be like such an outstanding storyteller. Not just when it comes to, in ring, but like in situations like this where I felt like he did the bulk of the heavy lifting here, like talking for, I guess, the two teams. And, he was great. Like, I love the little kind of like, quote unquote, maybe like, insider references here. This was, to my knowledge, like the first reference to Bullet Club, in AEW, the first reference to Ring of Honor. It worked. Like they had to escalate this a little bit, more from like, is Hangman really pissed off? Well, now Hangman is really pissed off because he said it. So I believe in the match, you'll probably see that escalation just hit another boiling point.
I really enjoy segments like this. I thought it really added a lot for this tag match beyond just being a great match. I thought they really hit on the friendship here. That is the story of this match on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, it's not exactly similar to the Golden Lovers Young Bucks storyline, but it's kind of along the same veins, and I hope they find that same amount of magic in the match itself, where like going into the match, it's like, okay, I mean, this is sort of a friendly thing. It's going to be a bit of a friendly competition, but then in the body of the match, things just like all of a sudden get that much more heated, and coming out of the match is when the friendship is completely irreparable. So I look forward to seeing what they can do.
Do you think this would be the role Kota Ibushi would be in had he come here at this point in AEW? Do you think that he would be in a similar like Hangman Page role teaming with Kenny Omega, or would you see something drastically different for him?
See, I don't know if they would have redone that story. I also don't think that they really probably would have had anything planned until like,
I think Kenny's totally different in AEW if Kota comes in. I think that's almost like the prime story because that they had already begun that in New Japan, and this would have been just the natural extension of it. And I think Kenny and Kota would have been like the prime focus, I think, of the company during the first few months.
As a lead tag team, yeah. They hold
I think many ways you could have gone, whether you rekindle the tag team or you eventually split them off. Yeah, it's just an interesting what if.
Yeah.
They plugged the signing of Lance Archer and said that there would be more on that next week. So he turns 43 on Friday.
Wow, really? What a birthday present. New contract.
Final segment is the weigh-in. And they said that there's only one person that can host the weigh-in. And I was waiting for my co-host to be introduced here in Kansas City.
Jeez.
The only weigh-in that matters. Yeah, I was going to wait for you to like bring out Gina Carano and Kenny Florian. Instead, it was Gary Michael Capetta who came out to introduce both men. And you could tell he was definitely, I think, a little caught up in being in front of such a large crowd. But in terms of the voice, guys still got it.
Oh, yeah.
Still got those pipes.
Is he still active, like doing non-wrestling stuff?
I mean, he goes to conventions and stuff. I don't know how much ring announcing he actually does anymore. Maybe on like a small level. He's got a very underrated book. If you've never read Body Slams, very interesting book. Actually, the best story I remember from reading that, and this is almost 20 years ago, was when he was the ring announcer with WWF. A young Shane McMahon would often like sit next to him, and Capetta explained in his book that there was one night he spoke to Shane and he said, "What's the one lesson you've learned from your father?" And Shane, and granted, this is probably teenage Shane or so he's like really young. He tells Gary, never let your talent know how much you're worth, then you can get away paying them less.
Oh, that's terrible. Oh, man. That's terrible. Okay.
Anyway, that's my Gary Michael Capetta story. But a very good book, if you want to check it out. Jon Moxley is out first, followed by the Painmaker Posse that came out with their version of the Gracie Train, and dude, I thought this was so great.
This whole thing was awesome, man. They modeled it right after a boxing, like a big boxing weigh-in, and I mean we've seen wrestling just like abuse the contract signing so much that I thought it was so refreshing to see another variation of that in the form of a weigh-in.
Especially coming off the Tyson Fury, Deontay Wilder like mess with their weigh-in on Friday, and that was such a big sports story over the weekend. Like just the whole fight in general. I just thought it was a really nice change of pace doing a weigh-in,
and then also just like having everybody surround the ring, having all this build up and fanfare leading up to guys standing on a scale. I mean, it sounds so silly, but it works because it just feels like it's such a grand event seeing everybody there.
So Gary Michael Capetta goes to call on Jericho to stand on the scale, and Jericho just grabs the mic, calls Gary a weird little man, and says, based on your technique, it's no wonder WCW went out of business. Everyone knows the Painmaker goes on last. And I don't know if this was an audible or this was like a planned mess-up spot, because I didn't know what this was.
Probably planned, don't you think? Like just to
make Jericho the heel. It could have been, yeah. So Moxley gets on first. He's 234 pounds, the Brett weight, and then Jericho is just taking his time. Tells Kansas City to shut their ass, and then the Kansas City fans start the tomahawk chop and chant for their Chiefs, and the whole place is going nuts. This is always going to be, to me, the Atlanta Braves chant.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, just because of the Jays World Series, but okay.
So then Jericho gets the mic, and he calls Pat Mahomes a piece of shit, and I'm pretty sure he called him Aaron Mahomes.
I wouldn't know either way.
The quarterback? It didn't matter. This crowd reacted like he had just said that, I don't know, like this was sacrilege. So he keeps just stalling, and then he gets into Moxley's face, and Moxley headbutts Jericho and goes after the inner circle, and Jericho gets busted open on the bridge of the nose, and they do a close-up, and it looks like Moxley like nailed him.
Do you think this was a hard way?
It looked like he had a cut.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, I think they did the Joe Angle spot here. You didn't get the zoom in, but it looked like there was like a cut like right above his nose.
Well, the timing just seems so perfect for an actual, like, for a blade job, but okay. Well, either way.
You wouldn't blade yourself there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it looked great. It looked really good and added to the segment for sure.
He's all bloody. Dustin Rhodes runs down and just goes after Jake Hager. This match is going to have a lot of heat because of Dustin.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I would say on the card, it's one of the lower ones, but I think Dustin is such a revered and, such a pretty, like, I would say a pretty hot figure right now.
I'd say so. I'd say Dustin Rhodes is kind of carrying the load in that one, because I think Jake Hager needs to come out and have like a really good performance, because he has kind of just dissipated into the background of late.
I agree. I mean, I don't really feel that anticipation to see him wrestle for the first time. Number one, because it's Jack Swagger. Like, I've seen this guy plenty of times, and it's not that special. But I can't really say that they've kind of like built up his first match to be such a big thing. But Dustin will be beloved by this audience. And the match, I'm sure, will be good.
Rhodes took him out to the concession area. There was the low knee from Hager and tossed Dustin into the Dippin' Dots. The
Dippin' Dots. Ouch. Worse than that headbutt. They're cold.
There's nothing more amazing than Jim Ross having to call the Dippin' Dots. Darby then runs down. He has his skateboard, but Guevara lands a knee on him and blasts Darby, breaking his skateboard over top of him. It's left with Jericho and Moxley in the ring, and it's Jericho that hits the paradigm shift to Moxley on top of the scale and poses on top of Moxley to end the show.
Really nice visual to close the show with Jericho, like bloodied face, standing on top of Moxley on the scale, holding up that belt. It was a great way to send you into the pay-per-view. I really enjoyed this. Again, I thought it was a great variation on sort of like your traditional cliched contract signing that felt big, felt like an event in and of itself. Contained, I thought, some very good character work from Chris Jericho, like very much delaying the doing basically like stalling as much as he can before actually giving the audience the weight. Then we never even got his weight, did we?
No, it was like this. What is the commission going to say about this? Very
good question. He will probably have weight in. Maybe it's a morning of type of thing, early morning weigh-ins for Chris Jericho. But I thought it turned out great.
Jericho was just fantastic in this last segment. I thought he really carried this thing. No, not to say the others, like, it added a great atmosphere, just having everybody out there. But to me, Jericho was really the star of this segment. Great final segment. I thought tonight, there were like 3 home run segments with the Iron Man match, the Jim Ross sit down, and this final segment. I thought these were just tremendous segments.
Yeah,
and a match.
I mean, without Cody and MJF having a presence on the show, it kind of gave a bit more space for you to tell the story of, like, the Bucks and Paige and Omega. And then of course the main event here with Jericho and Moxley. And really, like, I'm sold. Those 3 matches alone, I think, are your kind of money making matches. Everything else is just kind of like, a bonus, and they're nice bonuses. They're great showcases for Darby Allin, Sammy Guevara, for Jake Hager, Nyla Rose. It's a chance to get eyeballs on them so that in the future they might be the ones to actually be the draws. But the focus was put on the main programs, and I thought they did a good job with all of them.
Yeah, I would say these top 3 matches are really, really strong in terms of the build-up. Like, I really cannot fault the promotion for these top 3 matches. I mean, if you're looking at their last pay-per-view that was, like, give or take 100,000, what is a success on Saturday?
Man, it's so interesting because, like, I've kind of learned that, like, my own enjoyment of something doesn't necessarily correlate with, like, how successful it might do in terms of business or ratings. So it's kind of hard for me to say, but I have to, like, at least judging by maybe our feedback to the shows, I have to imagine this will do better because I feel like the storytelling has really accentuated the matches on paper. Already on paper, this was going to be a good card, but because the storytelling and the buildup has been so strong for those particular matches, I really do imagine and hope that I think the numbers will reflect that.
Yeah, I think with Full Gear, I was surprised the number wasn't that much more than All Out was the one prior to that, just because you had, I mean, granted, it was only like 5 weeks of TV at that point. Now you've got several months of build for this particular pay-per-view that you would hope just naturally you've grown your audience and that many more people are watching your show regularly that want to pay for this pay-per-view by the end of it. So, yeah, it'll be an interesting number to analyze after the fact.
Full Gear was like a show where I think they were still very much learning how to put shows together, still trying to figure out the proper balance between in-ring content and maybe storytelling backstage elements on Dynamite itself. I would say from January on, they really figured it out with Dynamite, and I would say, like, there's maybe been one bad show in the bunch of like all the shows since like they came back in January. And that show probably wasn't even that bad. It was just not as good as some of these other ones. But some of these others have just been like, they've been spectacular every single week. And I would say the trend continued with this episode.
Yeah, I mean, this was a solid go-home show setting up Saturday's show. So the pay-per-view lineup, before we get to the feedback here, we have Jericho and Moxley for the title, MJF versus Cody, Kenny Omega, Hangman Page against the Young Bucks for the tag titles, Jake Hager versus Dustin Rhodes, Darby Allin versus Sammy Guevara, Nyla Rose defending the women's title against Chris Statlander, PAC versus Orange Cassidy, and not listed here, I guess we'll see about like SCU and Dark Order, but that was certainly indicated in the promo that match is happening. Maybe that will be on the countdown, the pre-show.
Yeah, the buy-in. Is that
the buy-in, right?
The buy-in. And I don't really need anything more, honestly. Like, even if you just gave me the 7, I think I'd be perfectly happy, because a lot of these matches are probably not going to be that short. You know, you could see Omega and Page versus the Bucks getting 30. You could certainly see MJF versus Cody getting 30, and I certainly see the main event getting 30. So, I don't think the card really needs that much more filler.
All right, we go over to forum.postwrestling.com tonight. On a scale of 1 to 10, tonight's go-home show, you voted it a 8.3.
Strong.
Adam writes, loved how uncomfortable that Elite Jim Ross interview was. I think that was kind of the intent that they were trying to go for.
Sure.
Like, try to make it like personal and uneasy and bringing up all that stuff.
The whole story is tension. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Regarding updates on AEW on TSN, last we heard it was doing well. Could you see TSN ever investing more in AEW, a la Aftermath, or even another company? I don't see TSN really going more so into pro. Like they did pick up the Countdown show tonight.
Yes, they did. Well, what about that second TNT show?
That'll be an interesting one. I mean, in terms of AEW content, like if AEW is producing content, I think TSN will certainly, at the very least, consider it if they have room for it in their schedule. But
they've got 5 TSNs, man.
Well, they've got like a lot of stuff as well. And wrestling is not going to be their number one priority. But in terms of like developing a studio show to cover AEW, that I don't see TSN doing.
No, I don't see that happening either. I mean, that was... Honestly, I'm a little surprised that it even still exists on Sportsnet, but, I mean, much of that was because of Arda, right? Coming, like, suggesting it, and then that was a part of the score, and then because they were so, the show was successful, Sportsnet continued it when they bought that out. It's a very different, like, I think, I don't know, philosophy. I certainly don't see TSN doing it myself. We go to Paul.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Why don't you finish that?
His comment was just about his 82-year-old Eastern European grandpa likes wrestling and has watched a bit of AEW. He thinks Jeff Cobb is related to Taz, and I believe he thinks AEW is owned by WWE, and it's all for business.
Ooh, interesting. Conspiracy.
I guess so.
Paul from New Jersey. I'd love to talk to your 82-year-old grandfather. We go to Paul from New Jersey, who says Omega PAC was terrific as expected. V Trigger City. Ali versus Orange Cassidy is a match I didn't know I wanted to see. Fun spot. What was with that Elite promo? That was awful. Overall, a fun, fast-moving show. Pretty sure Jericho called Patrick Mahomes' Kansas City quarterback Aaron. What a hoser. Question, does MJF get his comeuppance at Revolution, or does that feud continue?
I think there's certainly the opportunity to do something with Arn in that. I mean, you've done this story now where you've got to keep Cody away from the title, and you can go two ways. You could have him get his revenge on MJF, which isn't the worst idea. It's a solid win for Cody, and then maybe they go in the direction of this next championship that could really be built around Cody, or you could extend this further, and I think it's a matter of time before Arn leaves Cody that you could do that.
I feel like there's more life in the program than just one match, unless they, have a change of philosophy where they feel like they're not going to drag feuds up for the sake of dragging them out. But I don't think that's it. I think the audience is clamoring for more. than just one match between these two. So I see it continuing personally.
Billy was at the show. Says, I came from St. Louis to be at this one live, and the room was electric from start to finish. Anyone doubting if the old Kenny is still in there can stop now. PAC and Orange Cassidy is a dream match that is going to drive pay-per-view buys. Great booking.
Kenny says, I love the show tonight. Omega and PAC was about as good as wrestling gets. My only complaint, and I get that I'm the prude here, but can a DDT on concrete followed by a super brainbuster at least be a 2 count? This might be a dumb question, but do we know if Santana's eye patch is legit? If so, the guy's ability to work a 6-man like that is incredible. Oh, he means like, can he actually see through the eye patch, or is it a real eye patch? Yeah. We wouldn't know. I have never been more wrong about a wrestler than I was about Orange Cassidy. I was sure his act would die on TV, but he's consistently a highlight of the show for me. I can't wait to see him kick PAC's butt on Saturday. Finally, say what you want about JR's commentary, but his sit-downs have been amazing. That interview did more for the Elite than anything else they've done on Dynamite thus far. 10 out of 10. Hey, on the topic of commentary, what do you think about like Taz kind of like joining in as like he pretty much like took over for Tony after like the first match, didn't he? Because Tony was doing so many interviews.
Yeah, I don't mind it at all. I think Taz fits in there really well. It's a different dynamic without Tony, and I like having Tony on the team, but I don't need him there for the whole 2 hours, so I'm fine with Taz coming in there. I
like Taz a lot. Like, Taz and Excalibur are a really good team together, and again, it's like, this is serious Taz, who's just like very knowledgeable, of course, about what's in ring, but he's been very knowledgeable about the storylines and the characters too, so I think the two of them are great together. When you add JR to the mix, I think it's still very good, it's still very much the same thing, but it's, you know, I guess a bit more star power attached to it, I guess, with JR and Taz both there. So I like it. In many ways, I actually kind of prefer it to the Tony Excalibur JR team. But I know Tony kind of has his appeal as well, because it's, you know, it's nostalgia. He's sort of like the guy who is impressed by everything he sees in 2020, 2019. That's fun too. But I think if I had to choose between the two teams, I would choose Taz.
JT from Manchester. Fun show, great opener, and a lot of really good stuff like the Cody MJF vignette and the Bucks Omega Page sit down. But mostly I have a question. Does AEW have a 10 count or a 20 count outside the ring? Jimmy Corderas has been saying it's a 20 count, but I've got no memory of seeing or hearing this mentioned before. Google throws up a couple of articles that mention it, but they aren't officially from AEW, so I can't tell.
Didn't they do a 10 count in the match?
Tonight they did a 10 count, because that's what Kenny had to beat to get in. So tonight it was a 10 count.
Yeah.
I can't recall them ever teasing a 20 count. But I was actually thinking about that when they were on the floor, if they do the 20 count or not. Because I can't remember too many count-out teases that they've done in the past.
Mm-hmm. Pretty sure it's 10.
Well, tonight was definitely 10. Like, that was when Kenny beat the count.
We got a Noah from Vaughn who says, hell of a way to finish the built-out Revolution. Excellent Iron Man match. I thought it was Kenny's best performance in AEW thus far. Just great stuff. I love the closing brawl, and especially the callback to Week 4 of Dynamite with the Dippin' Dots. There was a callback to Dippin' Dots?
Yeah, that was the last one where they did the concession brawl, and Jim Ross went nuts about the Dippin' Dots, so I think that was by design tonight.
Oh, I didn't even realize. Wow. Do you think that's a sponsorship, or is it just a funny thing?
Or maybe a sponsor they're courting.
Ooh, yeah, we got to get that Dippin' Dots money. Says it's a 9 out of 10 show, going to be live in Chicago for Revolution on Saturday, and will definitely give my live thoughts on the show. I'm so excited to see Orange Cassidy versus PAC. Should be fantastic. Yeah, we're going to be doing a live post show for Double Double Plus patrons on Saturday. So if you're a Double Double Plus patron, do watch us live, and if you happen to be an attendee, please call in.
Jay from Colorado, excellent show. I couldn't tell you the last time we got this good of a go-home show over on WWE, let alone 3 straight weeks of 8 out of 10 shows. JR always plays the awkward interviewer so well. He helped make that entire segment fantastic. We all know where the story with the Elite is likely to go, but they do so good at making it interesting, it doesn't matter if it plays out how we think it will. As long as they tell the story in an interesting way, that's really all I care about, and they're going above and beyond in that regard. Revolution was already a stacked card, and the addition of Orange Cassidy versus the Bastard PAC sweetens it even more. I'm super excited to see AEW live next week in Denver for the Revolution Fallout and Lance Archer. I never would have thought after hearing him getting signed a few weeks ago he'd come aboard so fast. I said it last week, and I'll say it again. AEW spoils us.
We go to Nick from Lansing, who says AEW had a lot to live up to with the high of last week and the prospect of Revolution coming up this week, but I think they lived up to the hype, starting with an excellent Iron Man match and ending with a fun, chaotic brawl that left you excited for Mox and Jericho to go at it. I think one of the best compliments you can give them as a company is the trust the fans live in attendance have. As exciting as Omega and PAC was, there was a very close near fall where I expected the fans to give the obligatory "that was 3" chant, but surprised by the response of AEW. The sit down with the Young Bucks and Omega and Hangman was excellent. Great use of JR as he balances the role of interviewer and peacekeeper, putting over the Bucks but recognizing Hangman's building frustrations as the interview goes on. The inevitable storm out was played out perfectly. That match will be incredible. With the announcement of a new match on Saturday, which do you think has the potential to be match of the year? Orange Cassidy versus PAC or Orange Cassidy versus Minoru Suzuki?
I don't know what we're going to see on Saturday, but I think whatever it is, I think it's going to be really great. That's my prediction.
For both of those matches, the atmosphere, I think, will be one of the biggest hooks. You know?
Yeah. Where do you put that match in terms of like positioning on the card?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, I certainly hope that it's not going to be part of the buy-in. I think it deserves maybe a bigger.
I think it'll definitely be on the main show.
Yeah.
I think so.
It can be great comic relief in the middle of the show. I think starting the show off with it can work too, but I almost think it would be better as like a come down maybe after the Kenny Omega and Adam Page versus Bucks match, which could potentially be like, a very emotional affair, or maybe even after MJF and Cody. But I mean, we've also seen them like pretty much like go in order of importance, right?
I prefer that method. I kind of prefer like the New Japan method, that like those last 3 matches we go in order and it's just one escalation after the next. Mm-hmm. And I think I just kind of prefer that kind of style of booking a show. Yeah. Right. Yeah. But
well, I think it'll be first then.
Could be first. I could see it being like one of the first 3 matches, maybe like second or third, somewhere in the middle. We'll see. But I think it's going to be a really, really hot atmosphere for that match. And the last one here, a great night for AEW, a killer Dynamite to lead into the pay-per-view, and the road to AEW Revolution was exceptional. If that's the same crew that were doing videos for TNA, I'm happy that they're getting to show their impressive production skills on a larger platform with TNT. 9 out of 10 for tonight's Dynamite, 10 out of 10 for the Countdown to Revolution special.
Well, okay. Yeah, sounds like it was a great rest of the show that we'll both watch. And if we have any thoughts, maybe we'll chat about it tomorrow.
Yes. Yeah, we'll chat about it on Thursday. Ruthless Aggression, the Evolution episode. You had a chance to see it. This one, to me, I don't think we have to spend as much time as the first episode, because after the first one, they kind of got all their insanity of their historical recollections out, and now it's more so. The second episode was more so centered around John Cena, and episode 3 on Evolution, which to me, you and I have always brought up like the footage that this company is just sitting on. Man. And to me, this was really, did I oversell it, or did I deliver in terms of my expectation that I gave you for what footage of Randy Orton they just were able to dig up, and that there was a camera on this man nonstop during his absolutely insane period?
Well, I'm certainly impressed by how much footage they have, but I'm also just as impressed anytime they do something like this of whoever's cataloging these shots, whoever's responsible for digging out this like one Betamax tape that must be like crammed in a corner somewhere just to somehow find the specific shot of Randy Orton saying mockingly, "I'm a babyface.
I'm a babyface."
To illustrate this one.
Now smile, you little punk.
Oh, it's incredible. It's incredible. Like
Randy Orton being an asshole at an autograph session. Let's look up. Oh, there's plenty here. Randy Orton. You're the big man in town? Exactly. Go away. No, seriously, go away.
I'm sure they've got a system where it's just like keywords. Randy Orton, asshole, and just a full 10 pages.
All I will say is, like, if you are a newer wrestling fan over the past, like, I would say 8 years, and you weren't following Randy Orton in the mid-2000s, like, this dude, there was literally a point where it would not have surprised me for them to fire Randy Orton. Like, that's how bad things were for this guy, who was just, I mean, this to me, this episode, it just shows you Randy Orton just was the ultimate asshole at times in his career. And very interesting just to see as well, kind of just this formation of this group. A big focus on Mark Jindrak, who was all over the first episode, and how close he came to being in Evolution. The other name that was always like kind of tied to the planning stages was Rhino, that they never addressed in this episode. They just kind of focused on Jindrak, and
the Jindrak stuff to me was the most interesting because I didn't know about it personally. And if you hadn't seen it, they basically tell the story of how when Evolution was created, they had their eye, of course, on Randy Orton and Dave Bautista as sort of the two prospects that they're going to lift up. But then, within weeks of them debuting, both of them got injured. And Randy Orton came back, but unfortunately, Bautista started training a little too fast and was re-injured again, and ultimately was out for 7 months, John? So they were planning a replacement for him. And in the replacement they were looking for, they found Randy Orton's very good real-life friend, Mark Jindrak. And they had Mark Jindrak appear on the show talking about that experience of almost being in Evolution. And I didn't realize it went as far as them actually shooting vignettes. And so we get to see these outtakes of Evolution, slowly walking down a road with just the most bizarre sight of seeing Triple H, Ric Flair, Randy Orton, and Mark Jindrak all in suits as they're walking. And just the heartbreak they would go on to describe of how during that shoot they shot the four of them together, but they also shot just the three of them together, just in case. And that type of stuff is just so compelling, especially because they had the actual footage that they can use to spell out that heartbreak.
Yeah, and I was trying to figure out the timeline of this, because I had always thought that Jindrak was rumored right at the start of Evolution. In this, it's kind of, it's presented as with Batista down, they might have put Jindrak in. Although Batista clearly says in this thing, his spot was never in jeopardy. He was always going to be in the group. And I just don't know. I just can't remember the timing. But Jindrak was definitely linked to this. And I remember hearing about these vignettes at the time.
Well, the video really, the vignette proved it, didn't it? That.
Well, I didn't know if the video was one of the very, very start of Evolution before they put Dave in the group, or was it months later when Dave was injured that they were looking at replacing him?
Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, according to their interviews and their timeline, it was while Dave was injured. But yeah, sure, who knows? But I thought that was really compelling. I thought all the stuff the profile about Randy was great. Now, did you find any problems with at least the issues with truths in this one? That
I mean, this one I just got I kind of watched without really taking notes or anything like that. To me, was there anything glaring? I mean, they were certainly. I mean, I thought they were very honest in the fact that they really messed up the Randy Orton leaving Evolution, that turn, the title switch. It was just totally awful the way they executed this, and it was just stunning at the time, because when the goal of Evolution, it was always get to Hunter and Randy. Randy was going to be the biggest benefactor of this group, and it was just by happenstance that Batista, you could argue, he became the bigger star. Certainly in 2005, Dave was the bigger star by, I think, a significant portion. But they put the title on Randy when he beat Benoit, and then the next night they did the turn, and he drops the title back to Hunter 3 weeks later. And that was going to be the WrestleMania match, and they went to it at Unforgiven, and Randy just was in a terrible role. And you could argue, and certainly that they do not shy away from how immature this guy was, and that's not an over-exaggeration, that it probably worked out for the best that they ended up stalling on Randy at this time, and he was still pushed, but Batista got into that role, and that build-up to WrestleMania was phenomenal. That was one of the great lead-ups to a WrestleMania with Hunter and Batista. And, we talk about, we talked about Austin and Lesnar and the idea of doing that match on TV. Batista talked about it years later. They wanted to do Batista and Hunter before WrestleMania on Raw, and Batista alludes to it in the piece that like Hunter was the one fighting all these battles to keep them apart from each other, to hold off till WrestleMania, because they just couldn't help themselves. It's like, this is hot. Let's just throw it out on TV. And instead they were like, no, we're playing the long game. And they ended up doing a huge number for WrestleMania. And Batista, like they created a genuine star in Batista during what was, a down period for the company.
Batista in this thing gives like just this glowing, admiration for Triple H being responsible for his successes. And I mean, certainly it's how he feels, but it also, like, to me, like, it almost makes me feel like Randy Orton and Batista were like sort of Triple H's first big projects as far as like people that, he was crafting and molding, which is what he does as of for anybody in NXT right now. So the way they framed it was almost like Hunter was developing these two talents, like going as far as, forget everything that you've learned in the past. Like I think they were at least not shy.
Oh, there was a real big dig at OVW in there by Hunter, about Batista being just trained to be, heel 101 out of the 70s and
not taking bumps.
Yeah, I mean, you could see Hunter certainly being critical of the OVW development of Dave Batista, and Batista himself, years later, or sometime around this time, he took like a really big, negative shot at Jim Cornette, who was really upset about being characterized, and eventually Batista actually did apologize over that, but I think that was very much Batista just pretty much echoing the words of Hunter at that time. And, looking at Hunter as like his mentor and just taking that point of view.
Almost forgot. Bubba Ray Dudley.
Yeah, let's talk about this. Okay, this is my biggest thing. I don't know how many people are aware of this story. It was a pretty well-known one because Bubba and Randy had like this back and forth a few years ago when it was the Will Ospreay Ricochet Best of the Super Juniors match, and Orton chimed in on that whole thing, mocking it, I recall, at some point. And somehow Bubba got in there Anyway, Orton took some shot at Bubba, and that kind of opened up this wound that went back to this injury that happened in March of 2003 on a house show with the Dudleys against Batista and Randy, and both of them got hurt. Batista, it was his triceps he tore, and Randy fucked up his ankle. And they did not interview Randy about this, and he was the point of view I think everyone wanted to hear from, but they got Bubba and they got Batista, and they both had contradictory stories about how it happened. And I'm just thinking, this company, they've got footage of goddamn everything. And this is one instance where we've got two contradictory stories and they don't have the footage.
Unfortunately, it was a random house show. Like, who
they would roll on house show?
You think they roll on?
I'm shocked they don't have that house show footage.
Maybe today they do, but I mean, if it was like 2003, 4, like, I don't know.
I even thought by that time, because it's not just like the idea of like just tape everything, but also from a legal standpoint, like when there are injuries or if there's some incident where like a fan storms the ring, like you want to have that footage in case of any kind of legal issue that might come out of an event that happens at a house show, that they will film everything. But 2003, I mean, maybe it's a case of they just didn't have the footage, but this was one instance where it was just screaming for highlights of the match and what exactly happened, because you have two sides telling totally different things of their recollection of what happened. And Batista did not have kind words for Bubba, and Bubba was trying to be very diplomatic as he was interviewed for a WWE piece.
It's so fascinating to me, like, that they managed to get guys like Mark Jindrak and Bubba Ray Dudley, and really, like, I would say, depending on who you talk to, I suppose you'll maybe interpret it differently. You might believe one person, you might believe another. But personally, when I watched it, I felt Bubba Ray Dudley did not come across very well. Certainly if you're watching an Evolution documentary, I think you would probably side more on like the principal characters. And I thought for me that was like Batista, who comes across like he always does. Like he seems like somebody who is not afraid to speak his mind. No matter if it's about Disney or Marvel Studios or, well, obviously when it comes to wrestling. So he was not afraid to, call out Bubba Ray Dudley, saying that, he was always an asshole to them and that they never got along. And Bubba, in contrast, I kind of felt was more like, I didn't think I did anything wrong. This is how I remember it. And yeah, really fascinating that, even like on a documentary like this, we kind of had such a heated back and forth via 2 interviews.
Beyond that, it really felt like in that first episode, that looked like a new Jim Cornette interview. And I'm kind of amazed that he, like, not even a clip in this. Because the OVW stuff was pretty key about Batista, about Randy Orton. And to me, he's the only spokesman they have now from that OVW period. So I think his voice could have been, could have lent itself here. Yeah, beyond that, I'm trying to think of like anything else. I mean, they really do position this as just Evolution was this enormous success, which at the beginning, it wasn't like this thing clicked from day one. If, in fact, you had the comparison on SmackDown where if you were putting your chips on one side of who were going to be the stars, I would have put it on Team Angle. Like that just seemed to be from the get-go. You had, 3 tremendous talents, and Evolution, it was like Batista was, not impressing anyone in terms of like what he was doing at the beginning. It took him like where he went from 2003 to 2005. I mean, he was never a remarkable wrestler, but certainly he found how to play his role very, very effectively. And Randy Orton, I mean, early 03, this was a guy that was dealing with a bunch of injuries. Certainly everyone saw potential in him. But I think, people were higher on Randy Orton. But it took Evolution a while before it's now just kind of revered as this, like, just legendary faction. Like, it did take some time before they got to that. I would say by 04, you had the Mick Foley program with Randy Orton. That really catapulted Randy. And, as you got on by the end of 04, you could really see Batista had something, and you had this match to build to it with Hunter, and that really cemented Batista as a top guy.
Yeah. I'm kind of with you in that, like, I personally don't look at Evolution as this like legendary group. But I, now kind of begins I guess it's kind of started maybe like when they did the reunion about a year or so ago, but like
they'll do the Hall of Fame deal with them. Oh
God. Like it's like the framing of like this thing as this legendary group. And I guess in hindsight, because of their careers, you can think about it as that, but I don't know. Like I wouldn't even like say they were on the level of like, I don't know, certainly not on the level of a DX or a Horseman or NWO, but I mean, it's
more so what they all like. Ultimately, it was the springboard for Randy and Batista, but more so what they did after Evolution, as opposed to, when you look at this is a group that was around for 18 months, and a significant like 6 months of that, there were a lot of injuries in there. Like you had probably a solid year from like summer of 03 to summer of 04 when they did the breakup. Like that was kind of the run they had. How about Ric Flair in this? Like they very much present him as just rock bottom in his confidence level that he's been very open about after WCW, and this was kind of done as kind of Hunter's rehabilitation of Ric Flair at the time when he was just to try and build himself back up. That Flair's talked about quite a bit.
A lot of that I really didn't know. That he was kind of going through that mental anguish. It certainly makes Triple H look like a really generous guy, picking Ric Flair because he felt like he wanted to really help Ric Flair find his old groove back, picking Randy Orton, picking Batista because he really wanted to help them in their careers. And maybe there's certainly, I'm sure there's truth to it. I also feel like maybe the documentary didn't really talk about perhaps what the group did for his own career. Yeah,
they didn't go too deep into that. I mean, the central focus really was like Hunter is the brainchild of this whole thing, and he saw these two diamonds in the rough, and he brought them to prominence. Like, that's kind of the one-liner about this documentary. I guess Jindrak really is made to be, like, I really feel he was brought in to be, in some ways,
Triple H buries him.
Oh, Hunter destroys this guy, and he really does feel like a punchline between the episodes of this documentary series I've seen. Mm-hmm. And I mean, you feel bad for the guy, and then there's that one scene where Hunter's talking about being in the car with these guys, and they have footage of, he talks about them making animal noises, and they have fucking footage of these two guys in catering, and Randy is doing a Tasmanian devil impression, and every viewer watching this is like, I totally understand Hunter's perspective here. Like, these two guys sound like the absolute worst people in the world to be traveling with.
It felt like
Hunter pretty much says, I didn't like Jindrak at all. I didn't have any use for this dude.
It was two grown-ups sitting in a car with two children, and the idea that Jindrak brought the worst out in Randy.
Yeah.
So
they saw something in Randy, so we'll put up with his shit. But Mark, we don't see anything in, and we don't have to torture ourselves by being around this guy.
They saw something in him, clearly.
Jindrak gets a bad rap here. I really thought that guy had a lot of tools that I think he was just way too young in WCW, but he had a lot of talent, and he went on to have a fine career in Mexico as Marco Corleone. Like, he would have productive, very good years in wrestling beyond WWE, but I think he was all you have to do is watch that first episode and see what the prevailing thought was of WCW and the power plant guys, and he was dead from the get-go. Like, he was just, and probably didn't do himself a ton of favors either, but it's one of those things in wrestling when you hear, oh, this guy's got a bad attitude, sometimes you just don't care for this guy, and that's a very easy, you just don't like the guy, and therefore they've got a bad attitude. Sometimes that's a legitimate criticism. Sometimes that's just a front for, you don't care for this guy, and you don't have any plans for him. So he's labeled a bad attitude. It's like, it's young guys in an industry. You're going to have, Randy Orton probably had, or did have an awful attitude, but he was also, they saw a lot of talent and money to be made. So bad attitudes can be overlooked too.
Yeah. I enjoyed this episode. I thought it was very entertaining. And that's what I watched these first and foremost for, is just entertainment. I thought there were some really interesting, captivating interviews and captivating things that were said by Hunter, by Batista. The Jindrak thing was fascinating to me as well. The Bubba Ray thing was fascinating. So for me, I thought it was a very entertaining, worthwhile watch.
Are you at the point where when Hunter is doing these on cams that you're not immediately taken to Obadiah Stane?
Yeah, he's kind of got that look, right?
Kind of.
Well, it's like he's not the only one with that look. Like, trying to think, who else? Bald with like a long beard.
I'm just saying that the Paul Levesque, the bridge to Jeff is a very short one.
Jeff Bridges. Oh, I get it. Okay. Yeah.
All right. That was Ruthless Aggression, episode 3. That's going to wrap things up. Thank you so much for listening to Rewind-A-Dynamite. Again, we'll be back Thursday night, 9 p.m. Eastern time for the live cafe hangout. So we will be joined by Mike Murray for a full rundown of Super ShowDown. What's going longer? Goldberg Fiend or Lesnar Ricochet?
Oh, good question. Goldberg, Fiend, or Lesnar? I'm going to say Goldberg and the Fiend.
And does that force them to make Lesnar Ricochet go longer? Because I can't imagine both being under 10.
Well, okay. Well, how about right now? Do you expect a title change?
In which match?
Not Ricochet and Lesnar.
I think Brock's retaining. I think there's a very good possibility of Goldberg winning the title. I think absolutely.
I think so too. And for that reason, I don't see them completely dropping out the Fiend. Somebody that they put a lot of value into. So I think that one could go a little bit longer. But Ricochet though, sorry, I think he's kind of expendable.
All right. We'll have a full rundown of the pay-per-view Thursday night. So thanks, everyone, for listening. Have a good night.